A hand-crank telephone. The kind your grandmother might have cranked to reach the operator in 1920. Somebody in Arkansas took one of these and carried it into a room at the end of a prison building. Arkansas called that room a hospital. A prison farm in the Arkansas Delta. Bare walls, an examination table. No medicine, just the table and the phone sitting beside it. But this telephone isn't connected to any phone line. It's wired to a pair of batteries, and 2 wires run off it. Those wires don't go to your ear, and when someone turns that crank, this is Tucker State Prison Farm, Arkansas. Here it had a name, the Tucker Telephone. Welcome back, friend, to Hometown History, the podcast that takes a stroll down the main streets and back alleys of the past to uncover how local stories shaped the world. I'm Shane Waters, and today we're headed to Tucker, Arkansas, where a prison farm wired a telephone to a man's body, and the state called it discipline. The Arkansas Delta, flat and rich, and planted in cotton right out to the horizon. Tucker sits about 30 miles southeast of Little Rock, and it has never been an incorporated town. The last census counted 95 people. The name goes back to John Woodfin Tucker, who put a plantation on this ground in 1871. For 40 years after that, Arkansas rented prisoners out instead of keeping them. The convict lease system went into state law in 1873, and a private operator could take a man off the state's hands for 35 cents a day. Governor George Donahue put a stop to it around 1912. Then, in 1916, Arkansas started buying this ground. 4,500 acres of Jefferson County bottomland. On paper, it was there to grow crops with inmate labor. Somebody did try to say something early. In 1921, a woman named Laura Connor went to the state and asked it to remove the warden at Tucker. The state turned her down. Another 45 years went by before anybody with a badge came out to look. Tucker held 274 men by the late 1960s, nearly all of them working the land, and the state paid almost nobody to guard them. Instead, Arkansas used the trusty system. Inmates guarding inmates. Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi all ran prisons this way. Inmates handed shotguns, pistols, and rifles and put in charge of everybody else. At Cummins, the bigger farm down the road in Lincoln County, 35 paid employees from the free world were in charge of a little under 1,000 men. It had ranks. At the bottom, the rank men who worked the fields and carried nothing. At the top, the trustees, and the trustees had the guns. Out in the cotton, the work detail was called the long line, and it moved under trustees on horseback. Arkansas ran these farms segregated. Tucker held white men. Cummins held the black prisoners, and the men the state labeled hardened. Arkansas didn't pretend otherwise. And the trustees controlled everything: food, medicine, mail, work assignments, punishment, 14-hour workdays in the fields, and barracks instead of cells, which meant nobody was protected at night. The state's own investigators put it in writing. Not enough food, and violence nobody stopped. And if you slowed down, if you went down in the heat, that's when you learned about the discipline system. The official one meant the strap. A federal appeals court banned that across the Arkansas system on December 9, 1968. With the strap gone, what was left was the isolation cells, and within 2 years, those were in front of a federal judge too. Then, there was the room at the end of the building. The hospital was where the Tucker telephone sat. The engineering is the ugly part, and it isn't sophisticated. A hand-crank telephone has a magneto inside it, a small generator. On North American lines, the ringing voltage ran around 90 volts, and the magneto is what produced it. I could find no record that anyone ever metered what the Tucker device put out. It was built to make a bell ring in a farmhouse. At Tucker, they rewired the magneto and ran it in sequence with 2 dry cell batteries, so what came out the other end wasn't a ring. They bring you into the room. They strap you to the table. One electrode clamps to your big toe. That's the ground. The other goes to your genitals. That's the wire the current runs through. Then someone turns the crank. The current runs the length of you. By all accounts, the men working the crank aimed to stop just short of putting you under, so you stayed present for all of it. At Tucker, a run of shocks back to back had a name. The men called it a long-distance call. What's documented is permanent damage to the testicles, and men who came apart mentally and stayed that way. This is where I have to be straight with you, because the record doesn't agree with itself on who built it. One name comes up more than any other. A.E. Rollins, the resident physician at Tucker, named as the man who put the device together in the 1960s. The Encyclopedia of Arkansas is more careful than that. It says the builder was, depending on which source you trust, a former trusty, a prison superintendent, or an inmate doctor. And the reporting at the time put Superintendent James Bruton, known as Jim, at the center of it, either way. He's the one who had the device, and he's the one the federal government prosecuted for what was done with it. Most of their names are gone. What survived is the court record and the federal opinion built on it. What I went looking for was one man's name to set next to that machine, and what the record hands you instead is a system. Men went into that room over a work assignment, over talking back, over nothing anybody wrote down, and they came out changed, and then they finished their sentences and went home to towns where folks didn't want to hear about it. And for years, that's how it stayed. Then, in 1966, Governor Orville Faubus ordered an investigation of Tucker. State police went in that August. Jim Bruton was gone the first night. When the investigators arrived, his house was empty. They searched it, and in the closet, they found it. The crank telephone, sitting in a shoebox, the way you'd store a pair of shoes you'd stopped wearing. The state police finished their report, and then it sat, Nobody released it until January 16, 1967, after a new governor had been sworn in. That governor was Winthrop Rockefeller, Republican, which was close to unheard of in Arkansas at the time, and running on reform, he put out the report. Newsweek put it in front of the country within weeks, with the beatings and the whippings, the pliers, the needles pushed under fingernails, and the crank telephone. Then Rockefeller hired an outsider to fix the place. Thomas O. Murton, a prison man from out of state, a penologist by training, with a graduate degree in criminology and a correctional system he'd helped build in Alaska behind him. Arkansas had never hired a trained one before. Murton took over Tucker in 1967. He ended the strap. The food and the sanitation improved under him, and the trusty system got pulled back. When the superintendent at Cummins resigned at the end of 1967, Murton was named temporary head of the whole Arkansas prison system, and he moved down to Cummins. Everything he'd changed at Tucker was something a man could point at. What was waiting for him at Cummins was underground. Then an inmate named Reuben Johnson started telling him something. There are bodies in the ground here, and nobody ever reported them. 2 weeks after Murton arrived, he decided to find out. January 29, 1968, Murton sent men out with shovels to the spot he'd been told about, and the national press stood there and watched. They found a skeleton. No marker. 3 skeletons came out of that ground in all. Johnson told him there might be as many as 200 buried there, and Murton believed it. The state's answer came fast. This was a pauper's cemetery, they said. Inmates who died of ordinary causes, with nobody to claim them. The Arkansas State Police produced a report of their own in May of 1968, and it landed on the pauper cemetery explanation. Murton called it a fraud. Rockefeller called it a mishmash. It stood anyway. Murton didn't last. He had invited the national press to the dig and gone after his own superiors in public. And on March 7, 1968, the Arkansas Board of Corrections fired him. The public line, and I can't tell you whose mouth it came out of, was that Murton had shown, quote, callous disregard for the problems of his equals and his superiors, end quote. A forensic anthropologist studied the bones years later. He couldn't identify them or say how they died, and he leaned toward an ordinary prison graveyard. One of those 3 skeletons had no head. The anthropologist never explained that one. No prison official was ever charged with a death at Tucker or at Cummins. Not one. The graves ended there. The telephone went to federal court. Inmates at Tucker and Cummins had gone to court. Holt versus Sarver. Sarver was Robert Sarver, the man running the prison system by then. They said conditions in Arkansas prisons were cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment. It landed in front of Judge J. Smith Henley, who in 1969 had already ruled several pieces of the Arkansas system unconstitutional and ordered the state to report back. He's the judge who counted the paid employees at Cummins, and the one who found the Free World staff were in charge in name only. He heard the men living inside describe the conditions, and he listened to the state's own witnesses admit the rest of it. The commissioner testified that trustees performed more than 90% of prison functions relating to inmates. Nobody in that courtroom disputed it. On February 18, 1970, Henley ruled. His written opinion, the one still on the books as Holt versus Sarver, says that for an ordinary convict, a sentence to the Arkansas penitentiary meant banishment to, quote, a dark and evil world, completely alien to the free world, end quote. It goes down as the first time a federal court found an entire state prison system unconstitutional. One man did stand in front of a judge. Weeks before that ruling, a different Arkansas case had come in front of the same court. Federal prosecutors charged Jim Bruton with violating inmates' civil rights, and he pleaded no contest. Under the law, they charged him with the most a judge could give him was a $1,000 fine and 1 year in prison. The judge who sentenced him was J. Smith Henley, the same judge. According to Times reporting from the courtroom, published February 2, 1970, Henley imposed the maximum the statute allowed and then suspended the prison term anyway. What he said from the bench was, quote, "The court doesn't want to give you a death sentence, and quite frankly, Mr. Bruton, the chances of your surviving that year would not be good," end quote. $1,000. Bruton never served a day. The man who opened the place up didn't come out of it any better. Tom Murton never ran a prison again. He wrote a book about Arkansas in 1969 and testified in front of a Senate committee. And by February of 1970, the same month Henley handed down the ruling, he was living in Alaska on food stamps with his wife Margaret and 4 children. He taught at the University of Minnesota through the 70s. In 1980, Hollywood made a film out of what he'd done at Cummins, with Robert Redford in the lead. Murton consulted on it and never made a dollar off it. He died on October 10, 1990, at a veterans hospital in Oklahoma City. He was 62. As for the doctor whose name keeps coming up on the device, the record stops. I could find no record that A.E. Rollins was ever charged. No disciplinary action either, and nothing from a medical board. An empty record isn't proof that nothing happened to him, and I won't tell you it is. It only means that whatever became of him, Arkansas did not think it was worth writing down. Nobody agrees on when the telephone stopped being used. Some accounts stop it in 1968. Others have the device surviving into the early 70s. And nothing I found settles it. The trustees lost their rifles. On July 1st, 1970, 4.5 months after Henley's ruling, Arkansas began replacing armed inmates with paid free world staff. And to my eye, that's the reform that made the rest of it possible. The courts didn't let go quickly. The Eighth Circuit backed Henley in 1971. The Supreme Court affirmed the ruling in 1978. Arkansas stayed under federal supervision until August of 1982, when a judge finally lifted it, and the state became the first one to climb back out after being declared unconstitutional. Tucker is still there. It's the Tucker Unit now, a working prison off the highway, maximum security, room for a little over 1,100 men, and about 200 people drawing a state paycheck to run it. Still farming the same ground, soybeans and corn and wheat, the same flat delta running out in every direction. There are GED classes in there now, and substance abuse treatment, and a program where the men train shelter dogs. What Tucker left behind is in the law. Before Holt versus Sarver, federal judges kept their hands off what happened on the other side of a prison wall, on the theory that it wasn't the court's business. After it was. Prisoners in other states filed suits of their own, and this time, the courts heard them. There's no marker, no museum. None of this was a secret. The trustees knew, and so did the men who ran the place. Arkansas State Police wrote it down. Nobody with the power to stop it had a reason to, because the people being tortured were prisoners. Held inside a segregated system, a state was still running like a plantation. Arkansas filed it under discipline. I keep coming back to a shoebox in Jim Bruton's closet, because you don't box a thing up like that unless some part of you already knows what it is. I'm Shane Waters. Every hometown has a story. Tonight, it's the shoebox in the closet. Good night, friend.